In the last couple of years, there has been a dramatic change in the operating structure and management of public transport in Melbourne. National Express is a significant part of that change, and this program is an opportunity for you to hear how many of the current issues are being addressed and how they affect you. Hello, I'm Paul Buckingham, and welcome to National Express Talkback. This is an edited version of a recent forum where staff from all parts of the network had the opportunity to quiz Director of Bus and Trams Peter McKenzie, Director of Trains Colin Andrews, Director of Sales and Marketing Des Sirleaf, and Peter Strachan, Chief Operating Officer for Victoria and Western Australia.
It's the opportunity to find out what's going on in the business, what colleagues have raised as concerns with the senior management team, and hopefully what we're doing about it in the business today. Play it a couple of times, discuss it with colleagues, discuss it with family and friends, and really see what you think about it. And if there's still some unanswered questions after that, don't hesitate to get in contact with me or any member of the team.
If there is an issue that is important to you that is not fully addressed in this program, you can follow it up with any one of the panel. Your question and answer may also be included in the weekly newsletter.
To actually get some feedback on different aspects like these bus guys and their concern and to see that everyone's actually interested in the company is good feedback. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
The first question in this program comes from Julia and is directed to Peter Strachan.
Is NX reasonably happy with the Australian performance so far?
Well, that's a good question. I think it could be reasonably open this afternoon and say that some of our big European competitors, namely Stagecoach and First Group, have had a number of unhappy experiences overseas. And the City of London and our shareholders and the stock market in the UK is really watching us very closely in Australia to see how we perform. I think we're on track. I think there's a range of things that we know, all of us know in our hearts of hearts, that we would really have liked to have done, that we haven't achieved, but there's some quite significant gains that we have achieved. It would be presumptuous to spend another 2 hours talking about those things. I think a lot of those things will come up later on this afternoon. But overall, yes, the group is pleased with the way things are going in Australia, pleased with the performance, but just recognise that it's a long road. On the train and tram franchises, they are franchises. They're there for 10, 12 and 15 years, and you don't do everything overnight. In the case of the bus companies, they are our businesses, and we've got a long way to go in terms of improvement. But by and large, yeah, on track, group pleased with what's going on.
You say we're on track. What is the track? Where are we going?
We've set out a number of things within the franchise plan, particularly on the train side. We committed to a number of things in terms of refurbished vehicles, new vehicles, customer service improvements, and a whole host of things that are committed within the franchise plan. So that unfolds as it goes on. I think you've got to look at the key business drivers of something like Bayside or M-Train as it will become, and say what are the key things that, if you do them well, you're actually delivering. Off the top of my head, customer satisfaction, I think, has to be number one, and that comes through in a number of ways. It comes through on the performance that our customers are telling us about. Are they satisfied? Are they not satisfied? Train service performance has to be a key element of that. And my goodness me, if you look at the numbers of last week on Bayside trains, what did we achieve, Colin?
99.1% punctuality.
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredible result on Bayside. I'm sure a lot of my colleagues in the UK would swap me for that result, straight away. So in terms of service delivery, doing well there. Safety, we should not be relaxed about safety at all. And I think that's true about any transport business anywhere in the world. So if we're delivering on the key safety outcomes, then we will have done a good job. And then you've got to look at the bottom line of the business, and I think that's 4. Let's not be shy about this, and I guess it's an issue that might come up 2 or 3 times this afternoon about profitability and how is the business going financially. We're here to make a profit. It's not a dirty word. We've got to make a profit, because if you don't make a profit, you can't invest that profit into the business and keep the business vibrant. So back to Julia's point about how are we going. Yes, these businesses are profitable, so we're on the right track. So I think if you keep those sort of 4 or 5 key things in mind, that's where we're going, as well as the additional things in the franchise plan.
Vandalism, it's largely responsible for a lot of cancellations and delays. You're mentioning the good figures we had last week. It puts us under a lot of pressure to achieve those figures with the amount of vandalism we do have. There are rumours around that the Victorian government's still picking up the tab on certain damage on the vehicles. I don't know if that's true or not. Considering we're running at close to $500,000 a month in OPRs and window glass at the moment around vandalism, what are National Express planning to do to correct that problem?
Can we, and I've heard that myth and fantasy of our time as well, the Victorian government still picks up the tab. Victorian government doesn't. I'd dearly love to be able to persuade Mr Brax and Mr Batchelor to pick up the tab for that, but I don't think they would give me a very fair hearing. If you look at the bill across the piece for vandalism, it's something like $5 million currently this year. That's a huge amount of money. And if you think what we pay in OPR as well, you know, when a shopping trolley goes on the track or, you know, whatever, then it adds up to be a huge bill. What are we doing about it? A number of things. One, I think, whilst it's a long, slow process, the initiative of the train patrollers has had some effect. You know, if you look at what happened before the train patrollers were there, and you look at what happened afterwards, they have had some effect. They are not going to solve the issue of vandalism in Melbourne overnight, because one thing that really perturbs me about it is this is a sociological problem. This is not something that's exclusively the domain of National Express, public transport, the transport industry generally. And I think all we can do is to try and quarantine vandalism and hooliganism and that type of behaviour away from public transport. If you look at what else we're doing, we're looking at different fencing to try and fence off parts of the railway. Not deployed too much of that yet, but we're having a look at that. We're looking at different ways of making sure that the vehicles are more resistant to vandalism. And one of the good things about the refurb ComEngis is the interior is less susceptible to vandalism than the interior of the previous version. They can still do things to them, and you know, it really grieves me to go in a refurbished ComEng that's just freshly out of Newport and somebody's had a go at the seats. I was on one on the Sandringham line just last Friday night, and you know, we got in the train, sat down, and somebody had a go at the seats already, and I know that set had only been out a couple of weeks. Now, that really is disturbing. But it's about constant vigilance and constant removal of things when they go wrong. We're going to look at more security cameras, more fencing, as I said, and if we believe it is something that we should be investing in terms of more staff on the system, then we will do that.
Talking about vandalism, I'm just wondering, with the vandalism and the way that the revenue protection is not being looked after late at night, what's the policy regarding that?
If you said to me this afternoon, what's the thing that you're most worried about in this business, I would say fare evasion. But I would have thought that it is not an unreal estimate to say that overall in Melbourne, across all the franchisees, we are looking like missing around $50 million worth of revenue as a result of that. Now, that might be as good as the next figure, and we'd all have an idea. But I think it's that type of problem that we're actually facing. We've identified that, and in our 3-year business planning process, we've put that right at the top of the list as the thing that we should capture. We have had some success thus far in the new deployment of the authorised officers and the tram attendants, and I think it's, you know, one of these unfolding stories. It will take a bit longer to get the right shift patterns, the right roster patterns, the right work coverage, so that we know where we're going to attack fare evasion in a big way. Back to the sort of sociological problems in Melbourne, if vandalism is one, then fare evasion is something that people think they can get away with. And provided we do that sensibly and not aggressively and not with, overdue force, then we have a good opportunity to combat it. So it's right up there in lights as something that we've got to tackle. But in terms of the detail, Des, Peter, do you want to?
It's encouraging that over the last few months we've been received very well by the Minister for Transport in terms of certain initiatives. The government has a key role to play in it. They control the penalty system and the regulations under which we operate to be able to enforce correct fares. So they have an important role. The ticketing system is important to it because it's the major excuse for people not to pay a fare. I couldn't get a ticket, so we've got a strong focus on that. And then internally and in conjunction with the other operators, we're doing a lot of work around how we work through the system to enforce correct fares and check people and check the largest volume of passengers and tickets possible. So we're working with other operators to get consistent and complementary strategies, and then ourselves inwardly looking where we're working on how we can be as productive as possible, intercept as many passengers, see as many passengers.
Bus Company Doncaster Depot. One of the burning questions coming from our employees or fellow staff is National Bus Company in the long-term plans for National Express Group, and will they be looking at re-tendering in 2007?
I'll kick off on that and look it to Peter. National Bus is very much part of our long-term plan. It's a strategic part of our business in Melbourne. It's a strategic part of the business in Australia. We want to have National Bus longer term. The re-tendering process, of course, we will want to re-tender. If anything, we would want to be even more challenging to the state and to the map, if you like, of bus companies in Melbourne. And if there's any opportunity to get even more than we've got now, we'd be very interested in doing it, provided, of course, the price is right and the delivery and the bottom line comes through. So rest assured, NX is very interested in keeping hold of NBC and making sure that we get the next term. Peter?
Grant, I suppose from my view of NBC, yes, our performance, certainly in my time at NBC from the back of 2000, where we are really making good progress. Our patronage is up, our performance is improving all the time. And I think as far as government is concerned, they use and benchmark a lot of the Victorian bus industry by what National Bus is doing from an operational and particularly a planning perspective, being one of the few bus companies in Melbourne which is really tied to patronage growth and patronage incentive. National Bus has to have a commercial focus, has to plan commercially, is very focused on providing services which the customers find attractive, and that is certainly showing itself by the patronage growth we're experiencing at the moment. Picking up on Peter's point, as part of my role, yes, I'm in a lot of conversation around looking at what the rest of the industry is doing, looking at opportunities, certainly understanding best what the government's view is on re-tendering. The National Bus scenario is a lot different to the rest of the industry in Victoria, and government watch that very closely. Certainly out to 2007, we're focused on making sure that National is in a position whereby government is very pleased with our performance and customers are well serviced by what we do, making sure that when it does come round for re-tendering, we're in a very strong position to hold our patch as it is at the moment, and if not expand it, as Peter says, in the years leading between now and then.
Peter, how are you going there?
Is there any likelihood of yearly bonuses being issued to employees if sick leave is not taken for the year? And also, is there any likelihood of employees with accumulated sick leave being reimbursed for forfeiting their sick leave from years gone past?
Okay, bonuses. Bonuses is always a very interesting issue, isn't it? Let me tell you where I stand on bonuses, and this is me from here, rather than thinking about it as a company policy point of view. I would like the position where everybody in the company is able to enjoy a bonus, and that bonus is not based on necessarily their individual performance, but very much the performance of the team and their work group. Now, that's where I sit personally in the bonus thing, because I think it is important to find some mechanisms that allows all of us, not just the senior executives or the senior managers, all of us to share in the success of the company. So that's Peter Strachan's view on bonuses. Will we ever get there? I think don't know is the answer. As part of the discussions that we had last year on the new EBA, the issue of bonuses was discussed at some length with colleagues in the RTBU and representatives, and being blunt about it, I didn't get very far. But I don't think that's a reason for us not to try and find a mechanism by where we can actually have some form of bonus scheme that is payable to everybody. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, would you ever have seen a train operating company where drivers actually had some of their pay based on performance and bonus, I would have said no, never. And I'm not going to go at drivers, gents, at the back. I'm just being realistic about where we are with these sort of things. In the last enterprise agreement equivalent that Middle Main Line in the UK signed up to, drivers are on a bonus scheme. Now, I would have said no chance, not in our lifetime, but it's actually happened. So, you know where I stand on it personally. I would like to get to a position where everybody participates, but that's got to be done through consultation, discussion, negotiation and agreement. On the second point, can I take that one on notice? I think we're in deep technicalities of the regime. I don't know the answer to that. If any other colleagues do, then they're very, very welcome to speak up. But Peter will take that one on notice and come back to you.
Just to follow on from that, Peter, has National Express considered the opportunity of the staff being able to purchase shares in the company?
Yeah, we have had a look at that. It is technically quite difficult to do. The reason that it's difficult is because we're listed on the London Stock Exchange and not on the Australian Stock Exchange, and it makes a whole host of taxation difficulties for the individual, not the company, if you start in share participation. The board hasn't closed its mind to it, but I think technically it's really going to be very difficult, and therefore that's why I think we're going to have to think a bit harder about, going back to Peter's point, is there some bonus system that we can get people to participate in instead?
We'll get a lot of people asking us questions about the one link, Peter. The Met card, big problems, and they blame us for it.
I think it raises a question that's right at the heart of the success or failure of public transport in Melbourne. And it's very topical and it's very pertinent. What are we going to do about it? Well, I think that's one of the thorny questions of our time. This is a contract that's in there until 2006. You know, we can't sort of say, oh, well, we'll give them notice in August and they'll be out by September. That would be, an interesting option. We can't do that, 2006. A lot of talk's been had about smart cards, and Des and I and other colleagues had quite a lengthy discussion yesterday afternoon about smart cards, and Des might want to talk about that in a minute, because having just seen some examples of that elsewhere in the world, I believe that smart card is where we need to go, but we need to make sure that we've got it right in Melbourne, because we're not Hong Kong, we're not Tokyo, we're not Singapore. We're not a very compliant society, if I can call it that. We talked about fare evasion. It's not like being in Hong Kong where people sort of nod and say, yeah, we will do that. Otherwise, it's not like Singapore where you're going to get 75 lashes if you don't do it right. Now, seriously, it's another of these psychological and sociological things where we do what we like. That's how we are. We're not compliant, and we need to be forced to do the right thing. So smart card, I think, is an answer because of what it does and all the added value that comes with smart card. But one thing is very clear to me: we have to get the specification right, because that's what the PTC and government didn't get right last time, and that's why we've got the problems that we have. So I think, even though it's hugely frustrating that we've not got a decent product out there, we just need to take the time, now that we understand a bit more about it and what its flaws are, to make sure that we've got that specification right, and we go out with the right sort of contractual mix to the right supplier to get something for the future. Des?
Whilst there's difficulties in the ticketing system, we have what we have, and we're going to have to get on and make the most we can of the business and move forward with it. So we're working very hard with OneLink, with the Revenue Clearinghouse, with the other operators to understand how we can improve the system that we now have, because it's a high level of anxiety for our customers. That's an important focus for us. We can't just shrug it off. We've got to get on energetically and try and do something about it. Another part, as Peter's alluded to, is what we're calling civil compliance or civil disobedience. The community is really protesting in some way against the ticketing system by not being compliant with fares. Part of the community says, well, that's fair enough. We should be able to voice our protest. So two parts. Yes, ticketing system. Yes, I think we've got a lot of work to have the community understand that they've got to carry a proper ticket.
I think just one thing further to say on that. I'm quite encouraged by the government's stance on it. Government will obviously speak for itself, but it would be very easy for government to say, no, we've privatised the system, over to you guys to sort it out. Peter Batchelor is really, really keen to sort this one out, and I think he's going to be a huge ally in getting the right system for Melbourne for the future.
National Express prepared to participate in other projects with other companies such as the Airport Link, and are National Express actively bidding or whatever for the extended country rail services to Mildura, etc.?
Yes and yes is the answer to both of those, Russell. Can deal with the country train services first. Number of components of that, and they all are a bit different. So I'll try and romp through that. We put a feasibility study commitment in the original V-Line bid to look at Ararat to Ballarat, Sale to Bairnsdale, Grovedale, Mount Dunedin, or whichever the location would be the other side of Geelong, and Echuca. We recommended to the government that we should, or we would want to participate in line extensions from Ballarat to Ararat and from Sale to Bairnsdale, and we also thought that the new station at Grovedale was a runner. Government thought about that for a number of months and came back with their announcement that they made in May this year, giving the green light to Ararat and Bairnsdale. So we're working with them to try and make sure that happens as quickly as possible. Government, of course, also said, and what about Mildura and Leongatha? And we said, well, we didn't participate in that study, but we'd like to have a go, please. And again, are working through that tendering process with them at the moment. At the same time, they put up for sale or up for extension of package the Warrnambool and Shepparton services, and we will be actively bidding for those too. So in terms of what I would call the line extensions and the other bits of country service, we're actively interested in all of those. We're very much in the box seat for fast rail on the 4 principal corridors. We've got a memorandum of understanding with government that talks about train procurement and being the operator, and we're also interested in discussing with government ways and means of dealing with the infrastructure in country Victoria, because I don't think it's any secret that I'm not that impressed with the performance of Freight Australia in their stewardship of the current asset in country Victoria. And if we can work with government to get a better model, then let's do it. Airport Link, as part of our Bayside franchise, we've put in a submission for a way to operate the Airport Link, and the government is considering that. I think, being fair to government, and again they can speak for themselves, they're looking at a number of different alternatives to provide a transit link, as they now call it, to the airport, through from bus to light rail to maglev to all sorts of different options. I firmly believe the option that we put to them is the best one. I would say that, wouldn't I? And hope they consider it the same way. So I think there's a bit of ground to go before we get a decision from government on Airport Link.
I've got a couple of others that I still need to ask. We've talked about V-Line a couple of times, and this question is apparent one again that came from outside. V-Line holiday package was a popular package which encouraged a lot of people to try train travel. Why was it withdrawn in November 2000?
There's an easy answer to that. It wasn't making any money. In fact, it was making a thumping big loss. And we could have all the arguments that we like about, well, you didn't try hard enough, or if you'd done it this way or that way or the other way, it could have been something different. We did have a long, hard look at that particular business, and reluctantly, and I was one of the ones who was quite reluctant about it, we took the decision to close the business. However, we do recognise that packaging up V-Line train travel or coach travel with the holiday and leisure market is something that we want to do. And if we can find appropriate partners to do that, who are best able to deliver the tourism and the hotel and that part of the package, where we're best able to deliver the train and the coach part of the package, then we will forge those alliances.
This is the end of side 1. To continue listening, please turn over the cassette and press play now. Thank you. One of the ones that we also had come in is on the same tack, so I just want to drop it in here, and that is future plans for Australia on a wider basis, and also even New Zealand and so on. Any information that we can glean from there?
Yeah, we'll deal with New Zealand first. We did have a long, hard look at New Zealand as part of the Transrail sale of their Transcenic business. We looked at that, when was that, earlier on this year? and came to the conclusion that at the price that Transrail wanted for it, we were not quite interested just yet. Thank you very much. I think that's the best way of describing it.
Thanks, but no thanks.
Thanks, but no thanks. But we did keep the door open in dialogue with them on a number of other subjects, particularly the metropolitan services, which we would be quite interested in Wellington particularly. So we've had a look at New Zealand from a rail point of view and said thanks but no thanks. If you look across the map of Australia, particularly on rail, it's actually quite difficult to see where the next opportunities would come from. Taking it from the west, we're actively interested in what's happening on the Southwest Metropolitan Link in Perth, down to Mandurah. That's a current government project in Western Australia. They want to keep that within the Trans-Perth operation and not privatise it out, but if they wanted an operating partner, we would be interested. Not much going on in South Australia, frankly. We've had a look at the potential replacement of the Glenelg to Adelaide tram. For those of you who know that, they want some new rolling stock. They weren't interested in our kind offer of W-class trams, but they want something a bit more modern than that. So we're looking at an option of a follow-on order from our Combino trams for them at the moment. Coming closer to home, here in Melbourne, we've talked about the line extensions, Country Victoria, Airport Link and so on, and we mentioned the activities in bus. Here in Melbourne, we're very interested in getting our hands on anything that makes commercial sense to widen the current NBC portfolio. Sydney is very interesting. One bit of me as a professional railway operator says I would dearly love to get my hands on State Rail and shake it and make it work. But I don't think politically that's going to be an option for a long number of years. And there's a lot of water to go under the proverbial Harbour Bridge before we see that being franchised out. Although there may be some fringe activities, particularly looking at parts of the CountryLink network where it's synergistic with our current V-line activity that may be on offer. And if anybody thinks the railway is going to be privatised in Queensland, then we better talk about it afterwards, because I don't ever see it happening.
Just still on the question of the future, and again, this was a question that came in from before. Plans for Swanston trams. Have you any plans for that for the future?
Yes, many and various, I think would be the best way of describing it. Swanston's a very important part of our portfolio. It's a bit back to the question I think that Grant raised earlier on about his NBC there for the long run. Swanston, or M-Tram as it will become officially, is a very important part of our portfolio, and we want to keep that for the longer term. I think it's really important, and I mean this in a positive sense, to modernise the way that trams operate here in Melbourne. You go across the world and look at the way that trams operate, particularly in Western Europe, and you come back thinking, wow, I wish we could have some of that in Melbourne. I think the new trams will make a huge difference. The new trams, the new tram infrastructure, the new stops, the whole way of looking at trams will become very different in Melbourne. But as I said at a conference in this city just last week, the environment has got to change so that trams are welcomed. Yes, there's a thing about loving the trams in Melbourne. We all feel that very strongly. It's a Melbourne icon. People come from worldwide to look at the Melbourne trams. But we are slowly but surely clogging the city with car traffic. And the quid pro quo, if you like, for us introducing that investment in new trams and new infrastructure is that the city regulatory authorities have to clear the way for the trams with better junctions, better intersections, less car traffic and so on. And I think then Melbourne could have a really vibrant tram system. Peter, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that it comes along the same lines as you're speaking about in train, the feasibilities into line extensions, the issues of infrastructure, clearly the mention you made of car traffic, the role of local and state government in expediting tram travel. Particularly initiatives such as the Fairway system in Toorak Road, the success of that, or otherwise as we monitor it over time and the impact of that, the appropriateness of that in places like Sydney Road and all those sorts of things. We have some very heavily patronised tram routes around, but as you say, they are either serving a commuter market in the high speed areas or in places like Sydney Road. It's off-peak, and we really need to get into areas of extension, and those we need to cover all markets and give the trams the priority they need to service customers well against the option of car travel.
The operating performance regime, OPR as we know it. Tell me, what do you think of it? Do you think it's fair?
That's another of these ones we need about 2 hours to answer it. I think. I'll kick off and I'll get Colin to fill in some of the gaps. Let's start from the first principle. I think having a performance regime is a good idea. It does incentivise the operator to do the right thing. I could also argue that there's a lot of other things that incentivises the operator to do the right thing, like customers vote with their feet. You know, if you don't provide a decent service, then customers will vote with their feet and not come to your business. But I think from a government point of view, given particularly the Brax government's real thrust about accountability and deliverability of public service, I can't see a position where they would let go of the performance regime. So whether we like it or not, I think we've got one for life. Is it fair? I think if you take the 3 different regimes, and they are very different regimes, the Bayside one is about right. The penalties and the rewards seem to be in a reasonable balance. If you deliver the sort of performance that we've delivered over the past couple of weeks, you get rewarded for it on the right scale. And if you stuff up, then you get penalised. That's okay. I think the V-Line one has a number of flaws in it, and these are issues that are not new issues for us, and are not new issues for the government. And the fundamental flaw in the V-Line regime is that the infrastructure provider, Freight Australia, is not sufficiently incentivised to do the right thing. So, for example, just throwing a few numbers around, we can deliver, if you like, a 94% 0 to 5 week on V-Line and still be in penalty. Freight Australia can have a number of major stuff-ups on track circuit failures or infrastructure condition and earn a bonus. Now, that to me is not quite right somehow in it. So I think there's a number of flaws in the regime that we need to iron out, and back to the issue about who is the right person to control the infrastructure in V-Line. The tram regime, well now, have we got 4 hours to talk about it? Yeah? The tram regime is really interesting. The tram regime has its history in a train regime. And my, I think, first flag would be to say, is it appropriate to have a street-running based regime mirroring a train regime when you can control everything that's going on in the train system, but as we know, you can't control everything that's going on in the tram system. Something like, and I forget the exact number, 70% of delay on Swanson is caused by other road users, completely outside our control, but we get penalised for. I don't doubt, going back to my first point, that there should be a regime, but I think with the experience of running it for 2 years, there are some things that we'd want to sit down and discuss with government about the equality of the regime.
The question is, introduction of the silver stations, what is the latest news on that, and how will they be manned?
Okay. Silver Stations is an interesting one. Silver Stations was a franchise commitment that was made way back in sort of 98, 99. Having been now running the business for, as I said before, nearly 2 years, we have, I think, a number of different options for the overall investment in stations. I'll be quite honest that when you're bidding for a business, what you do with the business thereafter, once you get into it and start running it and see how it actually works, rather than what they tell you goes on when you're bidding for it, are quite an interesting comparison. I'll be honest with you, I'm not convinced that the plan that we put together for Silver Stations was necessarily the best one that we could have done, and we want to sit back and review that and decide what we're going to do with it. I think there are a number of different ways of investing in stations, and picking up some of the points that Bob was making, that we could get a better bang for our buck and deliver much better to the customer than the original plan of Silver Stations. But it's in the franchise agreement, so it's one that we're going to have to debate with government, saying we might not do this, but we might do something else completely different. Because I think there is a risk with the whole philosophy of premium and Silver Stations, that what we end up doing is spending money at a number of places, but we don't actually overall improve the network. And I think there's a real need to start thinking about how we look after the station fabric on a number of lines of route, rather than just a piecemeal investment here, here, here and here around the system.
I think, Peter, I can also be slightly, even more brutally honest and say I was the one who actually wrote it into the bid.
It's your fault.
And having now returned to Melbourne at the end of January this year, I think Peter's absolutely spot on. When you were putting it down in writing and thinking about what it was that you were going to do on a planning sense, it didn't half seem like a great idea. And when you come back and you look at the maturity of the business, you think, what an idiot you were for putting it there in the first place. So, look, I'll be brutally honest with you, okay?
But Peter, we've got to do something. I mean, it's not that we can't just rock up the road to the government and say, oh, well, we're not going to do that one, see you later. We will have to do something, and we should do something to make that commitment to invest in stations.
Over the last couple of years, we've had a few publications which we've been promised. One was the Bayside Flyer, which was going to keep us up to date with the latest happenings in Bayside trains. We saw one issue, so we can only assume nothing much has happened. And the other one was a publication called Team Talk, and I think the latest issue in our depot down there is equally about 12 months old. That's just a comment.
Yes, you're right. We've had a number of failed attempts to get the written form of communication right. I think, again, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We're about to change that. We're about to go to a weekly communication. Nothing flash, nothing glossy, no colour pics of him and me and him and all the rest of it. Good, yeah, I thought you might say that. But just a couple of sheets of A4 with what's happening in the company, what's the performance, what's happening with staff, what's happening outside work as well as inside work, and we hope that will start to give a bit more direction and show a bit more leadership, which you've recognised may be absent in that area. The other thing that we'll be doing will be supplementing that from time to time with a larger publication that covers all the businesses and picks up issues that go on in National Express Group worldwide as well as just in Australia. As I say, proof of pudding and eating. We would value your feedback, all of you and your colleagues, when we get those actually on the road.
A number of the questions this afternoon have focused on the direction that the company is taking. My question is, what are the strategic objectives? Are they listed? If they are listed, where would I find them? And how can they be communicated to all employees? Certainly by the magazine that you've just spoken about. But has the company considered an intranet site?
6 questions there, I think. Straight up front, no, they're not listed. This may be a personal strachanism, if you like. I'm not a great believer in magic mission statements and vision sets and values and that sort of stuff. I may be considered unconventional sitting in my position in the organisation, not liking those sort of things, because I go to lots and lots of conferences and people put great big things up on the wall and say, follow me, this is the vision and the statement and all the rest of it. So you'll never find me really passionately believing in that sort of thing. I can just about be persuaded sometimes, but not all the time. But I think what we do need is go right back to the start of this afternoon when I talked about customer service, profit, safety, people, that type of thing. I think what we should do is actually list out what those key things are, because they frankly are the same in any one of our businesses. We had a session with William Rawson, the group finance director, a couple of weeks ago when he was over in Melbourne for the board meeting, and William was talking about the strategic direction of National Express globally, and it was the same sort of things. It's customer delivery, safety, profit, etc. And I think we owe it to everybody in the company to say, it's not rocket science, this, it's not a fancy mission statement, but this is what we're in business to do. So I'll give you that commitment that in one of the publications we will set that out. Intranet, we have had a long, hard look at intranet. We do want to do it. We don't think it's in the sort of first or second tranche of internal communication. I think it's much more important to address the issues that we talked about, or having failed magazines that haven't come out frequently. Let's get the basic bits of it right and then think about intranet. But I've remitted Simone to have a look at an intranet site, because she came to us from DOI really enthusing about the site that the DOI had. So I think it's in the toolkit, but not yet.
Just ask about uniforms. First of all, when will we get the new uniform? I'd like to know why a memo was not sent to all staff to inform that the distribution of new uniforms was going to be delayed, and why were we not given a reason for the delay? I'd also like to know, seeing as the new uniforms have been delayed, why new staff have not been provided with adequate uniforms for winter. City Loop staff stand at barriers in the freezing cold for the whole shift.
New uniforms, two parts. We have been working, as most people know, on a new M uniform, which will be provided for Swanston trams concurrently with our name change to M-Tram and Bayside to M-Train. V-Line, we have done some preliminary work, but as of yet we have not started in earnest on V-Line. So firstly, M, the new uniforms are scheduled for the 1st of October. That as an M organisations, everyone is issued with their new uniforms together with an understanding about the wardrobe they're provided with, how to wear them, and we're all ready to go on the 1st of October, so that's our target. In terms of the length of time it has taken, we have had delays. In the front end, we were delayed in our consultation process. To use an example, if I took this group and said, let's all agree on wearing exactly the same thing tomorrow, how long do you think it would take us all to agree? It takes quite a bit of work, so that was a bit of a delay to begin with. But then the scope of the project, we're actually producing 30,000 items of clothing. We're reclothing 1,500 people, so it's a vast project. And you don't, like new trams, walk into a shop and just pull them off the rack. The yarns are spun, the cloth is woven, and then the garments are made. So it's quite a large project, but we are getting very, very close, and I'm confident to say in the not too distant future there will be more and more information arriving for everyone to understand what's happening leading up to 1st of October. If anyone's standing out there cold, they shouldn't be. They should see their uniform coordinator, because we have put in place alternative arrangements. Even though it's not the same uniform as colleagues will be wearing, it's an interim to get us to the new uniform. So please, I'd be deeply concerned if people are standing on their post feeling cold, because we have planned alternatives, and they should see their uniform coordinator about that.
I've got a couple of others that I still need to ask. Redundancies. Can you provide a reason why frontline staff have been decreased every 6 months since NX took over? With the uncertainty of job duration, can National Express reasonably expect staff to provide sort of a total commitment? This was a question referenced to V-Line passenger.
Would be interested in looking at the numbers, because certainly if you look at the franchise numbers since we took over in August 99 across all businesses, not just V-Line, the number of frontline staff has actually increased and not decreased. So let's be quite clear about that. One of the worst aspects of sitting in the seat that I sit is actually having to act as judge and jury over redundancies and people leaving the business. I do not like doing that, and I think most colleagues in senior positions would agree it's the worst part of the job. But looking at the business, to create a long-standing, vibrant business, we knew that we had to make some economies, and regrettably those economies were in areas where people would leave the business both voluntarily and regrettably involuntarily. So it's a tough decision. You've got to make it from time to time to keep the business alive and be vibrant in the future. Will there be any redundancies in the future? I'm not going to sit here this afternoon and say no, never, and we're never going to make anybody redundant again. That would be a foolish thing for me to say. However, given the scale of redundancies that we've made over the first 2 years of the franchise, I would not expect those sort of levels of redundancies to happen again.
Can we transfer between divisions without losing long service leave is one question. And the second one is there still a first aid courses running in the railways like there was years ago? And if so, can we from National Bus Company and other departments go to the first aid courses?
Okay, take the first one first, Ian. It's certainly a principle in National Express's family that there should be mobility between the different companies. That's not a carte blanche for saying, oh yes please, I just want to go from tram to train to bus and back again. It's got to be a a sensibly planned thing so that we've got vacancies and we don't actually create a bow wave of vacancies in the place where people are transferring out of. So with that caveat, I would say it's something that we would want to do, and it's a sensible thing to do to encourage that sort of ability where it's possible. Just go back to what I was talking about when we talked about free travel before. We just need to be very careful with these things that we're not unduly constraining a successor franchisee, particularly on the tram and train side, by allowing people to continue over with conditions of employment. And we just need to watch that sort of thing and make sure that we can work our way through that. So it's an in principle, yes, we would like it to happen, but let's deal with individual circumstances as they arise.
Can I just touch on that, because I have had situations before where people from interstate, particularly in the bus side, are looking to change and have even from time to time had inquiries internationally about coming over. I think, picking up on Peter's point, the operations we have are distinct companies in their own distinct right, etc. And as Peter said, in principle, yes, as National Express, we should be able to move around. However, we've got to recognise that we are moving from one company to another company, and we've got to make sure that it's the right step, and that it's not a try and buy situation where you go over and say, after 3 months, no, it wasn't what I expected. You've really, after you've moved, it's got to be conscious, it's got to be well thought through. But when you go, for argument's sake, you went from National Bus here to Southern Coast Transit in Western Australia, then really, yeah, I think your length of service, etc., needs to be taken into account and can be carried along with you. But really, because of the different company regimes, franchise regimes, award regimes, all those sorts of things, you've really got to say, okay, I'm going to finish my service at National Bus. I'll take with me my continuity of service over to Western Australia, but I will be starting again in a new company, and that has to be a conscious decision made, and for all those right reasons. But in principle, yes, it should be able to be done.
Your question about first aid courses, there are first aid courses that run within the trains division for selected groups of staff, and certainly as far as I'm concerned, as long as those courses are designed to achieve the first aid result that you'd need, then there's no reason why there shouldn't be attendance to those courses if that was the best course of action.
Well, I think from my perspective, Ian, on the bus side, we need to be aware that the courses are around and see if we can make local arrangements for people that are interested to go along and partake in those. It's a very sensitive thing, especially in the day and age we live with, as to whether people wish to avail themselves of those sorts of courses, whether they wish to be involved in those sorts of things, and really at the pointy end of it, when something does occur, does that fit with their beliefs that they should intervene? Are they comfortable to intervene for all those sorts of personal issues which people carry with them about what they would like to and what they feel they should be getting involved in from a first aid perspective?
So there you have it, the key issues that are affecting you and National Express. We trust you have gained value from listening. Peter Strachan.
Well, that's the first step, I think, in some open dialogue and some open communication in the company. If it's been a success, and I sincerely hope that it has been a success, if people get talking about it, then we really want to do this again and make it a regular feature in National Express.
And just a reminder, should you have any specific questions that are still unanswered, you can follow the issue up with any one of the panel in your own time. Finally, you may have noticed a feedback form enclosed with this recording. After you have listened, please fill it in and send it back to Peter personally. The details are on the form. Thank you for listening.
Like one of the chaps on the railway said, he learned a bit about the buses, we've learned a bit about the railways, and I think really we can go on and create a bit more of an atmosphere where you're not competitors against the other divisions.